Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining and for being with us. Please sign in to the chat and let us know who you are and where you're from. And we're going to have a little bit of tech background before we begin our conversation today, but we're excited. We know we have at least like around 50 people signed up, which is a very great turnout. And we are focused on our conversation today with leadership from the National Circle of Indigenous Agriculture and Food, NCIAF, from Canada. And it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce Chris McKee, who is our Senior Vice President for Business Development for NCIAF. And Chris will be moderating our conversation with our two leaders from the group, Nishin and Adam, who will tell them a little bit more about themselves with you. Just a note on the NAAAN, the North American Agriculture Advisory Network, which you all know, has an MOU that we signed in December of 2024 with NCIAF. And we're very pleased to be able to really feature that partnership and to learn a little bit more about NCIAF together. We have translation for anyone joining from Mexico or from Canada who would prefer to be asking questions in a different language or having this translated through Wordly. Please click on this link and you'll be able to do so when we get to Q&A. Rebecca, do you want to let's show our speakers again for today. And we are excited. Part of the NAAN's mission and work is really in creating and supporting economic rural prosperity across our three countries. And what is the role of extension and advisory services in that?
Oh, test, here we go.
So we want to be able to work together and learn more. And that's what today will be about, is finding out the links to economic rural prosperity, as well as how the work of NCIAF is creating food security in the provinces and in the First Nation tribes of Canada. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chris McKee. Chris.
Perfect. Good day, everybody. Thank you so much for having us out today on this platform. It takes us across a lot of different areas of the world for sure, and North America in particular with this. And we're just excited to be here and explore how we can journey alongside all of the wonderful connections that NAAAN has created and all the partnerships across the three countries. So happy to be here. I'm joining you today from Alberta and Treaty 7 territory, a treaty that was signed in 1877 between the Crown and multiple nations here in Alberta. And those nations included the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Siksika, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina nations. And really, at the end of the day, we just want to acknowledge that we respect and honor the treaties made on these territories, and we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past. And we're committed to work in partnership with these nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And that's where I'm joining you from today. As Carrie said, I'm with the NCIAF and the business development side, and I'm going to turn it over to Nishin to introduce himself before we get into the presentation.
Thank you much, Chris. Good day, everyone. Bonjour, Nishin Dejnakas Makwaradam Ganabajing Donjaba. My name is Nishin Meawasige. I'm president of Manitoulin Brewing Company. And it's my pleasure to be here today on this platform as well. Very much looking forward to participating here today and sharing some insights with respect to the work we've been doing here at Manitoulin Brewing Company. We fall within the Robinson-Huron Treaty area of 1850 here along the north shore of Lake Huron here in Ontario. So looking forward to some questions today and some good conversation. Rich.
Thanks, Nishin. And Adam, over to you.
Everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Adam Subject. I'm Lands Director for Sioux Valley Dakota Nation. Ho doke yaunhe, mi Adam and makiak widow, nia yohe, wohoha, we wahapa wopido. I wanted to say thank you. I'm wishing everyone a great day. I'm actually originally from Lake Huron in Georgian Bay. I'm a Saugeen Ojibway band member, and I traveled this way, got my education in Treaty 7 territory where Chris is now. I'm I'm actually here in Calgary at the 9th Annual Indigenous Energy Forum. So I'm trying to do a couple things at the same time, which can be challenging, but I'm grateful for the time here. And I also represent the Dakotas in Manitoba as their lands director. So I can't wait to share some of the work we got going on and get the conversation going in a good way. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm going to take about 5-ish minutes. I'm going to flip through some slides. I'm going to tell everyone a little bit, you know, at a 30,000 foot view about the National Circle for Indigenous Agriculture and Food. And, you know, this was an organization that had a lot of conversations over a lot of years, that a lot of different government bodies and private sector sitting around a table trying to figure out how we can really accelerate Indigenous agriculture right across the country, but specifically at that time was in Saskatchewan. And what came to transpire during these conversations and in the middle of them was the discovery of 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops, British Columbia, that really sparked a reality at a residential school that our harms of the past were a thing that cannot be ignored any longer. And what that did is it sparked Farm Credit Canada to say, we're not going to have meetings anymore. We are going to put money into an organization. We're going to launch it and we're going to go. So what they did was they started, and about 16 months ago, hired our full-time CEO. And in these 16 months, we have had a absolute landslide of conversations and calls and projects and anything that you can imagine right across the Canadian landscape. If we could go to the next slide, Rebecca. So what they did when they put in this mandate for us across the country was really, at the end of the day, I can show you 17 slides and 400 different stats, but we provide white glove service to any Indigenous peoples, communities, or organizations across the country at zero charge. We are here simply to accelerate and journey alongside the great work that has happened, is happening, or will happen into the future, keeping in mind that always in our purview, when our leadership team looks at where we're going and what we're doing, we're focused on our next 7 generations and what impact that we can make to ensure that there is food security and food sovereignty in our nations, in our communities, and we do our part to do that. I'm so excited that a couple of those great gentlemen that we've been fortunate enough to journey alongside and do some work in collaboration with are here with me today, and just to talk a little bit more about what is the potential and the opportunity when there is partnership and collaboration. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this just gives you an idea of our mission and our vision statements as across. We are in upwards of 60 projects across the country, supporting different initiatives from aquaculture, maple syrup, crop, bison, traditional harvesting, microbreweries, big breweries, anything that you can imagine in the agriculture sector right across this country. And really, again, just keeping in mind those cornerstone foundations that we are just here to journey alongside. Next slide, please. Some core values that are on there. I'm sure when this is done, I mean, either through the recording or through what we're going with the Connect platform, you will get access to these PowerPoint slides. And I'm not going to spend the time to do that and go through word for word, but really at the end of the day, we have 3 foundational pillars. We have business development, we have capacity development, and we have reconciliation. Our business development side is on, you know, those core foundational pieces or acceleration pieces in the business sector. The capacity building runs through the education side for our youth and other pieces that exist. And reconciliation isn't a standalone pillar for us. We really interweave that in between everything that we do and share throughout all those business lines. Next slide, please. So we've got with us today Manitoulin Brewing. Big Nishin is on the line here with us. He introduced himself. Next slide, please. as Adam said, Sioux Valley Dakota Nation that we have had the pleasure of working with. If you go on our social medias or on our website, you can see 2 videos that highlight these 2 great initiatives that are ongoing. They're about 7 minutes long. I encourage you just to take a look. It'll give you a way better understanding of the impact within 7 minutes that these things can really take off when partnership and collaboration exist. Next slide, please. And really, at the end of the day, I will wrap it up. I will keep it to the shortness so that we can get to the good conversation. But really, we can't do what we do without our partners and those that we work with across here. And, you know, right there, almost in the middle, if you look at the NAAAN and that the work that we came together to try and build and foster and look at right across 3 different countries, and putting the power of that collaboration and partnership outside of the Canadian context and be able to spread the word and spread that knowledge and everything else. It's just invaluable when we journey alongside those like-minded organizations. So we're happy to be here. We'll get into the panel. I'll fire off a few questions to these fine gentlemen. We'll get that into the way. We'll get you to know them a little bit more, and then we will make sure that we have time at the end for some Q&A, and you can pepper them with questions. I don't take questions, only they do, so that's good. So it'll be good for them to to hammer in. So we'll just get right into it. And I think, you know, I thought about these questions and I thought about what should we talk about today, and I thought, well, you know what, TED Talks seem to be a great thing, so let's we'll just chuck a little softball question out there to each one of you, and we'll start with you, Adam. But can you tell us what's the most exciting part about developing a product or initiative for you personally? What is that piece of what's the exciting part for you?
The most exciting part is just the excitement you get in the nation, whether the initiative is empowering the youth or perhaps it's taking the bison and making a marketable product. You get that nation buy-in. You get that from all levels. You're talking from the elders down to the youth. They all want to see things succeed. They want to see their nation on the map. And so a lot of the time, you know, you get to that point or that stage where there's kind of a roadblock or they can't get to that next phase. When you're able to make those moments happen, I call them breakthroughs. When you get to a breakthrough and you see that, whether it's that kid who gets that job or it's that teenager who gets into that you know, program he was trying to get into, or high school, knowing that you were a part of that person's journey, that vision of where they're trying to go in their life, and then the broader picture of how that fits into the nation's goal where they're trying to take their people. So the more exciting thing for me is when I see that moment, that breakthrough happen, and then it's time to get on the gas, because it doesn't stop there. That's just step one. Now we got to keep it going, right? And I often find that when you have that one of those breakthroughs, it's like a chain reaction. All the dominoes start to fall down in place. And I'll give you an example. We had a grassland restoration project, and I got all the funding and we got everything secured and everything was set. And so our first day in the field was to go and collect the seed. So we go out into the field and we go to collect the seed, and we had one person show up. And we have to collect thousands of pounds of these microscopic skeet, like we had to get 100,000 pounds of this weight. And I remember sitting in my office just frustrated, like, how is this going to happen? How am I going to make this breakthrough happen? And, you know, I have the stress and the pressure, and I'm sitting there like out of nowhere, like through the universe, like I call it like a laser beam of information hit my brain. And all of a sudden I realized we have over 100 kids sitting in that school. And they can't tell us no because they can't tell their teachers no. So I have all the manpower I'm ever going to need sitting right in that high school. I'm not trying to say I'm pro child labor. All I'm trying to say is that we have all these, you know, we have all these things that need to happen, these deliverables in our high school system and our educational portfolio. We needed to have more events that had children on the land. We need to have land-based strategy. We also needed exercise. We're seeing different health problems, you know, with obesity and different things like this. So it checked so many boxes all in one thing, and it was a major breakthrough. The part we didn't see coming, we had over 100 kids on the field, and they loved it more than us. And out in the field, one other thing happens I never realized. You're away from like the cell phone towers or the networking, so none of them could access their phone. And it was almost the greatest thing you ever saw. No one cared about the phone. So those are some of the breakthroughs, some of the excitement that I see that you never see coming. It almost like you see the one thing where it's going to work, but the three other things that happen, but outside of it that's where it truly that gets me going in the morning. So
that is awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. And that's what we always say. We just got to get our kids' hands back in the dirt and off that cell phone or that iPad or that video game, and just really that connection that's back in there. And I think you summed that up just beautifully. So thank you. Nishin, over to you. What's the most exciting part for you? What gets you just buzzing instead of an espresso in the morning?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that are exciting about the work we're doing here at Manitoulin Brewing. We've been doing it for over a decade. In our early years, it was just exciting to create something out of nothing, right? To be able to create a product, to be able to share that product with friends and family and community members here on Manitoulin Island and get their feedback, to be going through those initial business development stages of that just sheer creativity, right? To be able to have that opportunity, that's one of the kind of really memorable moments for me. Those early stages, and then 10 years later and along the way, there's a variety of other different things that are exciting, right? A lot of the work that we do at Manitoulin Brewing, really much, we like to think that, we're more than just craft beer, right? Yeah, we're creating a product for folks to enjoy with friends and family, but we're also creating a product that's about real places and real stories. And Manitoulin Island's got a very rich culture, both Indigenous culture and non-Indigenous culture, and we like to be able to really amplify that culture and those landmarks and what it means to be here on Manitoulin Island and be a part of this island when folks visit it throughout the year. So we very much have aligned all of our products with landmarks and cultural aspects of Manitoulin Island, and it really does hit on all the senses for folks. The taste, the look, the smell, and that nostalgia that really kind of reminds people of their experience with us here at Manitoulin Island. We have a great team. That's another really exciting part for me right now, is we've noticed a shift in terms of the team that we have. We've got a younger demographic, younger sales team, production team that's starting to emerge, and they're really they've got lots of great ideas, and we also recognize that our customers are evolving, right? We're shifting away from we like to think we're contributing to a culture of responsible consumption as opposed to overconsumption by promoting craft beer and the responsibilities that are tied to that, and moving away from what some may say is just an older generation of consumption, involved with quantity, and more towards a younger generation that's not so concerned about quantity and more concerned about quality, right? And be able to enjoy, and the food pairing aspect of it, and the educational and the learning and the experiential aspect of it. So we like to think that we're playing a part for our own little part towards that here on Manitoulin Island, here in Ontario. And I think that's a big part that resonates with this younger emerging sales team that we have. Very dynamic individuals, and we like to, we've got a lot of great aspects of our business that we've leaned on over the years, and we're going through this next phase of breathing some new creativity and life into what we've been doing over the last decade, based on the individuals that are working with us, right? And the feedback that we've been getting from our customers over the years, and the community as well, right? That's another big part. I know there'll be another question with respect to collaboration and things like that, so I won't get too long-winded on that. But those are the things that make me excited, right? Is sharing our story, right, through our product, and for us, that's the name of the game.
And I think the point you touch on that I laugh every time when I think about someone who has a dynamic product is we want quality over quantity and not over consumption. Swingbridge Ale and the strawberry, I'm sorry, but it tastes so delicious. There's a real good chance there's going to be overconsumption on those. Like
Yeah.
they should probably not taste so good if that's the angle that we're going for.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, on that same vein, let's just dive straight into that. Like when we think about the initiatives and collaboration, Manitoulin Brewing has had this huge ripple effect impact on organizations and communities, not just on Manitoulin Island. I mean, it spans out across that, but like what has it been like, and what are some of those partnerships and collaborations that you've been able to foster outside of the business itself, or leveraging the business in order to build those things?
Since day one for us, being able to be a part of the local community here. I mean, I moved here just over a decade ago and didn't know a lot of folks here. So when I knew of Manitoulin Island and coming here, we knew right away that we had to look to each side of us, to our neighbors and our businesses, and see what they were doing to advance the local economy here, with respect to food and beverage, agricultural, and see how we fit within that. And there, over the years, we've accumulated some great collaborative partners, some long-standing accounts, and I want to take a second and also just kind of acknowledge the work that the NCIAF has done with us in helping kind of showcase these, because they are there is that video that you referred to either earlier, Chris. There is a good overview of all that, and I just kind of scratching the surface on that with respect to some of the responses to the question today. But it's we have some long-standing relationships, right? Manitoulin Hotel and Conference Center is owned by 6 of our local First Nation communities here on Manitoulin Island, and we've developed a very strong relationship with them over the years, hosting different events, collaborative events, really trying to emphasize local ingredients and local producers, as a collective, right? And it's just been a long-standing relationship for us, and we're very proud of that. We've had, it's resulted in, community members from all of those nations, expressing interest in working with us, and employment opportunities, and that initial collaborative relationship really helped explode and create more awareness and more opportunity, right? So another relationship that we've developed over the years is with the Manitoulin Island, Manitoulin Streams, I should say. So their focus is on water protection and conservation. A few years ago, we did some collaborative work with them on our Oudemans strawberry beer product, where we were able to get some of the portion of the proceeds contributed to that nonprofit, where they were able to promote a summer program focused on a water keeper program, focused on kind of blending that Western and both Western sciences and in our Indigenous kind of ecological knowledge together, to be able to create more awareness around protecting the waterways here on Manitoulin Island, regardless of whether it's on Indigenous or First Nation land, or in municipal land or private lands, right? And I think that was that was an exciting initiative for us, that really just created more awareness and created provided us with an opportunity to build more relations as well with other individuals. And we've had the opportunity to speak about that and share about that, and we look forward to future opportunities that are similar in nature. Other collaborative efforts with off-island folks like the Manitoulin or Killarney Mountain Lodge. It's a very well-known provincial park, and there's a resort there. Just long-standing relationship with the folks at Killarney Mountain Lodge with respect to the level of tourism and influx of individuals coming into Northern Ontario. These are very prominent destinations that we're able to kind of work closely with and collaborate on and do some exciting events, right? We've done some cool events like Current to Killarney. It was a large Voyageur canoe race from Manitoulin Island to Killarney, where it brought in folks from all over Ontario to race in these large canoes. And, it was just another opportunity to bring in folks right, like-minded individuals and learn about and spread the knowledge about what Manitoulin Island has to offer. Other collaborations, right now we're really excited. We just launched a new product with Costco here in Canada, our first time, 6 locations here in Ontario, and it's an exciting opportunity for us to be able to start looking at that wholesale side of things. And it's another kind of touch point opportunity for our sales team and our to be able to really demonstrate that our business is building some momentum within the retail wholesale side of things. And that those wins create leverage for us to open up other opportunities for other collaborations. So I'll end it with this one is this weekend we have a cycling event here on Manitoulin Island. It's a collaboration with a local Manitoulin Island cycling advocates. And we've been doing this with them for the last, I think, 4 years now. And it's just another collaboration that we really rely on every year, and we work together. And it really is helps kind of galvanize our business with other businesses here on Manitoulin Island with very similar mindsets on promoting local agriculture, local agritourism, and really trying to promote that to the rest of Ontario and the visitors outside of Ontario.
That's awesome. And just on a side note to that, if you're ever in Manitoulin during the cycling event or any other time, if you have the opportunity to go to Maya's garden, oh my, can she grow just anything that you can imagine to build any kind of meal and salad and herb and tourniquet and traditional. It's a beauty. That's a beauty. Amazing garden right there.
Everything she serves on site is all grown in her garden there, and it's massive, right? And it's just a really cool atmosphere. So we're pretty proud of that relationship.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much, Nishin. And I think on the same vein that you left off on, Adam, how important, I know how important, but to share with everyone here just how important it is to engage the youth in the work that we're doing, and watching those youth thrive. How does that play a piece into these initiatives that I know you've got many that are on the go right across the entire nation, but what's that youth aspect, and how does that engagement really play that integral role?
I think I like to base all my stuff in fact, and I'd point no further than the Stats Canada. I think if you look at some of the statistics we see, 100,000 jobs, agricultural jobs, will be lost in the next 10 years. And a lot of demographics are actually in a state of decline. Indigenous nations are actually growing. And so if you put those two things together, it's not hard to imagine the importance of empowering these youth instead of a generation of poverty from the effects of, as you mentioned at the beginning of this, with residential schools and the 60 scoops and all these things that have impacted the Indigenous nations. If we have an investment now, we could create a generation of wealth. And I think it's really easy to see, for example, with one of our projects, we have the grassland restoration project. And it gets these kids back on the land. It gets them restoring their proud identity as land protectors or guardians. Even the Dakota's creation story, they're there as protectors of grandmother Earth. And so you put them in these important roles as land stewards or land managers or land keepers. You could be creating another wave or the next wave of livestock herder or bison keepers or whatever it is, and that could really contribute to the global food supply chain. And then now we can actually see a chain reaction of events. So to empower these youth in those important positions, I can't tell you what it's like to see a youth come running over to me. Okay, I'll give you another example. I was driving down the road and I had this young guy, his name's Riley, come running over to me. And I stopped my little UTV. Is everything okay? That orchard we planted, it's growing. And his eyes were popping out of his head. And these are some of the things our elders were trying to say to me when I first took the role, is that it's not just about the empowerment of the youth, it's the relationships that are built as it's happening. And so a lot of the elders, when they were working the fields when they were young, they built these lifelong bonds, not only with the land, but with each other that go on generations. And it helps break some of the chains of society impacts that we see. And it creates lifelong bonds that tie families together forever. And so the elders were telling me that not only are these broken, but the soils that we used to see in these lands, they're becoming desolate, and the chemical operations that were allowed in these areas. So by going back the old way and getting the kids getting the kids with their hands in the dirt and getting the old school way of collecting seed and all these things, not only do you foster in that old way, that traditional way, I think there's a way you can do it. We can blend, Western science and technology. For example, we have a drone program this year that we're starting up. It has over 24 youth allow the youth to become the drone pilots themselves. We have contracts with Living Lab Manitoba, that allow the youth themselves to seed the grassland, not only by hand, but with the drone. So to empower a youth to not only be able to fly, to pilot a flying robot, but also like respect their traditional or ancestral inherent right to be on that land in a way that promotes not only the conservation, but I would argue protection of that land. And now we've grown that contract. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be saying this yet, but we signed contracts with WWF, NCC, ECC, and now we could become one of the first producers of wildflowers for large tracts of lands all across Canada. And that's especially important to the Dakota people. Their ancestral lands go from the mountains to the Great Lakes. And now we might have an ability to get those the people of those inherent or ancestral lands actually healing the land themselves. And that's I think the key here is that you empower that youth, you're healing that person. And when you heal that person can heal the land. And when you heal the land, that land can then heal the person. Everything's very circular. And that's some of the great things that when you empower a youth, you empower a generation. And I believe you empower change.
Yeah, and I really, at the end of the day, I know we want to get to Q&A and we want to get to that, but I'm gonna throw you a question that maybe wasn't prepped in advance. And you know what? I just wonder, from both of your views, I would love to know, in all the Indigenous culture across, we always talk about the next 7 generations. Nishin, what would you say your utopia would be from all the initiatives, the collaboration, the partnership, the hard work coming from a garage, building just an amazing business and an amazing partnerships? What would your utopia be as the impact of Manitoulin Brewing and the work that you do 7 generations from now? What would that be?
Well, I think 7 generations from now, what I'm already seeing right now is this, this next generation of individuals coming into our business and causing change in itself, right? I love seeing that. I'm very excited to see where the business heads from this point. We've been doing craft beer for a number of years. There's always been discussion around creating other products and opportunities and delving into other markets, beverage markets outside of craft beer. So perhaps that's something that we'll be starting to look at. I think, from a community and collaboration perspective, I would love to be able to see us continuing to work side by side with our neighboring businesses, right? We're seeing more businesses starting and opening up here on Manitoulin Island. When we started, it was a very lonely spot on Highway 6 in Little Current. Now we have a brand new motel next to us, and next on the other side of us, we've got a Tim Hortons, another business set up there. Now we have a new restaurant down. We've got maybe 4 different new restaurants downtown. Like there's a sense of pride knowing that these folks have decided to build their businesses and be positioned next to us, and we're all working collectively to, you know, really elevate the experience of Manitoulin Island. And I think, you know, for me, I'm excited to have more conversations around how we can learn from what we've done in developing these businesses in a sustainable way, right? You know, learning from the communities and the regions next to us on, you know, where did they make mistakes, you know, and where did they run into challenges, and how can we learn from that in advancing our business, and, you know, really encouraging that approach so that we're doing things in a way that is, you know, is going to ensure that the pride that we have in the lands around us and the businesses around us, that pride is going to transcend from one generation to the next, and no one at any point is going to get that feeling like, no, I don't know if I really want to start a business on Manitoulin Island. You know, maybe I need to go somewhere else. I don't like where Manitoulin Island is headed. You know, I want to be able to see that it's something that where, you know, these future generations see Manitoulin Island as a viable and a great place to bring their family and to build a business, particularly, you know, in the agricultural industry. I think there's so much potential there. We have a lot of communities that are wanting to move in that direction, and, you know, if we're able to help, you know, and contribute to everyone's collective effort on advancing our agricultural interests on Manitoulin Island, that's what it's all about for us.
Awesome. And Adam, what about you? Utopia in 7 generations from the perspective of Adam Subject.
You know, you look into the world and you look across across the ocean, and you're seeing, I hate to say it, but maybe shades of World War III. You're seeing fighting on borders. You know, you're seeing different policies and tariffs just south of us. I might be an Indigenous man on an island, but I'd like to see a world, you know, where love starts to win. And I mean this in a way of, you know, I think there's a lot of celebrations that celebrate our differences. I don't know if there's enough celebrations that, you know, celebrate what makes us similar. And, you know, I don't remember, it's like there's the Canada Day, there's this day, there's that. Where's the human being day? And I think if we do things right, we have the opportunity, if we invest right now, you know, we have the opportunity to do the right things here that could create that utopia where we're all, you know, human beings working together instead of, you know, yeah, I know profit's important, but maybe instead of the, you know, profit being the top priority of a business, what if it was longevity or how they help one another? And so for me, in my heart, these are the major changes that need to happen if we're going to make it to another level or fourth dimension, as they call it. And a perfect utopia for me would be that maybe the Indigenous were highly regarded instead of looked down upon in ways of learning how to you know, farm the lands or food production or security. And I think we're starting to see we're starting to go down that road. We're starting to see some of those things happen. For example, we just perfected our hydroponic unit. We're growing 600 heads of lettuce a week out of that. Now we're starting to sell that to we could be selling that to surrounding co-ops, but instead of that, we decided we wanted our people to have a healthy access to healthy food. So we chose that health of our people over the profit. And I would hope that that's the trends that we start to see in Adam Subject's perfect world. Loving one another, care for one another, and maybe even other nations. You know, I was sitting here, I was in Vancouver with Chief, and we had driven to Calgary, and he had to get back. And I'll give you another example. And the news broke out of the fires. And you know, and we were like, oh, you know, it shocked us. And I said to him, we should be up there helping. We should be doing something. I'm like, we can't even house our own people, and we should be up there trying to help them, because could you imagine if that was us? And I mean, I think we need a world of more of that type of thinking. That would be my answer to that question.
Thank you so much to you both. And I mean, Adam brings up a super important point, and our thoughts and our prayers are with those up north that are battling these wildfires right now and who've been displaced and everything else. And it just leads me to my closing comment before we head into the Q&A. One thing that has always boggled my mind within community and those different pieces is, at the end of the day, we need land, labor, and capital in order to be successful in agriculture. We have the largest arable land tracts or access to First Nations across Canada. Over 300 million acres are Indigenous access lands here, First Nations primarily. We have a labor force that is ready, willing, and able and ready to go. We have capital arms that are there. We all the opportunities are there, but you've got two examples of two very different ways of approaching community in these two gentlemen that are right here. One of them is doing initiatives and focus and driving those initiatives in community. We've got one with a super successful business that has allowed them to have partnerships that are and collaborations in building community outside of community. But I can tell you personally, being in each one of these gentlemen's communities and being in events with these gentlemen, their reach and span is far greater than a product line in a business and greater than a Dakota Nation. I was in Calgary at a conference yesterday. Who's there? Adam. Who knows Adam? The best hugger across anywhere that you can imagine, and they run to him and they want to see him. When we were in Manitoulin Island, Nishin has been at other events with us. We went to 7 First Nations that surround Nishin's home, and every single person, we could be in the lobby of a hotel. Oh, Nishin, yeah, where's he at? Is he coming? He's probably late. The span that these young men and the impact that they have is far greater than the technology of the business of Manitoulin Brewing, who's revolutionized their ordering system that could be replicated around the world on AI and those things, to Adam's conversations and the tears in youth's eyes and elders' eyes, tear in his heart and his passion. I think it just can't be overlooked. And I think it's just a testament to the strength and resilience of Indigenous people that are across this country. And with that, Carrie, I am going to turn it over to you. We're going to go to Q&A. We'll let that fire out. I don't know if Rebecca is going to pull up the chat or how we're going to field these questions, but over to you.
I just thank you so much, Nishin, Chris, and Adam. What an excellent overview. Thank you so much for starting us off. And we just want to make sure that we get to some time on conversation. And I think there have been so many topics and ideas that have been shared. So if you can take your cameras back on, please, to let us know who's here. And also sign on in the chat if you haven't had a chance to. This is about community. This is about creating a conversation across our 3 countries, focused on the good work of NCIAF today. And I want to give a shout out on Michelle Sandercock on the bottom left for me, the team of NCIAF out of Saskatchewan. We just say thank you and hello to you, because this wouldn't have come together without you. So we're just excited for the work that the NAAAN will be taking on with NCIAF. But let's get on to the conversations. And Chris, I'm going to ask you to keep fielding them, and Rebecca, what we have. But I know we have our leadership from AAFC, the Canadian leaders from the government that lead with us in the NAAAN. We have also other extension specialists from the United States and from Canada and Mexico that are with us. So let's create this conversation, and specific questions, as Chris mentioned, for Nishin and for Adam, but also for Chris and the leadership of NCIAF. Who would like to kick us off?
We got some hands. We got some questions in the chat. What are you going to get more? We'll auction them off.
That's right.
You're just going to hear us talk and ramble if you don't put your hand up, and you probably heard enough from us.
I'm not shy, so I'm going to ask anyway.
Right on.
I joined late. Sorry about that, but I'm curious in the context of AI and Indigenous knowledge, ancient wisdom, and language, because all the models are in English, and they don't necessarily work well in the context of Indigenous languages. So I'm curious to hear any perspectives on that.
It's you, Nishin. There's no AI brilliance coming from me.
Yes, I can speak a bit to some of our adoption of technology over the last number of years at Manitoulin Brewing. We're a relatively small team, and we've always wanted to keep it that way. It ensures that we're building that capacity within. We wear multiple hats, and technology, though, especially since when COVID kind of became a factor for everyone, we had to pivot fairly quickly to be able to leverage some of those sales streams that were still available to us. And looking at technology with respect to automation and ordering automation, and over the last couple of years looking at the AI side of things to really augment our sales efforts, particularly in the beer industry. There's a significant amount of engagement on a day-to-day basis with different retail customers. In Ontario, we have an organization called the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, the LCBO was referred to it. And there's a number of locations all throughout. So there's a high volume of engagement that's required. And we were trying to think of ways that we could use technology and even AI to be able to augment that engagement. So we've gotten into a point where we've actually been testing ways to use an AI agent, salesperson, that can actually interpret inventory levels, can read inventory levels of our product throughout any given LCBO in Ontario, and actually utilize email engagement by advising them on their inventory levels and giving them a recommendation in terms of product ordering, alongside our sales team efforts. So that's one of the areas where we've looked at AI. We're also using it, to help with just in general an email engagement effort to give really kind of customized communication to all of these. Again, the volume of LCBOs in Ontario, that's been a really big factor for us. Automation has been massive for us. There's a significant amount of automation that we've adopted as well from a technology perspective to be able to accommodate the number of orders coming in on any given day, as opposed to and the big reason for that obviously is efficiencies, but also it can get pretty mundane for an individual to be processing order after order after order after order on any given day, and really you start to lose interest in those roles, and it makes it hard to hold on to people. So technology really has helped us also kind of retain, to draw in talent and retain talent, and really kind of automate a lot of the lower level kind of just boring activities, right? And allows our sales team to focus on more of that dynamic engagement with respect to sales, and really let their personality shine with respect to that sales approach. So we've worked with some local, in terms of adopting some of that automation and AI, we've worked with some local organizations, a lot of them federally funded, that these organizations provide grant dollars, alongside our own investments, to be able to make that less of a barrier for us to be able to consider and develop, very focused kind of proprietary technology that works for our operation, because you can invest big dollars into larger systems that you may only need a small portion of it. So we've been able to really draw on these programs to develop systems that are very specific to our needs at a fraction of the cost. And the federal government, Ontario government here, our provincial government as well, we've been able to work very closely with some local organizations that help flow those dollars out. So that's been a big help for us as well over the last number of years.
I'll touch in on the Indigenous language. Language revitalization, and a lot of Indigenous language are some are in trouble of becoming extinct. What we've come to learn is you know, a lot of the Indigenous language is actually uniquely tied with land. And I'll never forget this. I was building a land use plan for the nation here, and that got kiboshed really quickly. They do not like the term land use. And it quickly became the land's economic plan, all these different names. We finally settled on the land's relation plan. And that's what it is a relationship with the land. And I've come to learn it's a relationship with the other creatures on the land. It's like, that's what the language, that's what the Indigenous language is. It is uniquely tied to land. And I bring this up for a reason, because I was asked to get the unwritten law of the land, but to write it down. Did you hear what I just said? The unwritten law of the land, and they wanted me to write it down. And I couldn't. I tried for a year. I couldn't figure out. I know it's funny, Nishin. I tried, and I finally came to it, and we found it. And it was in a passage an elder said to me, and he said, I hope, he was coming to the end of his life. He's no longer here anymore. His name's Hank. He goes, I want to live a Waka way of life. And I said, what is that? What is that? What did that mean? What did you just say there? The Waka way of life is to live on earth as though you never left a footprint. Is the highest honor a Dakota person could ever achieve. It means you lived an entire life and you didn't leave a footprint or an impact, but in fact, you made everything better. And when you start to look at some of the language coming out of, you know, some of the policy, I'll give you an example, you know, the 2030 net zero targets. Some of the language you see in there is that we need to reduce the footprint, carbon footprint by 2030. I'm like, you stole that from the Dakota. All you added was the word carbon. So I was able to finally write this down in a way that the Dakotas found was acceptable. And it was this idea to live a Waka way of life. So what we learned is that the language and the land are actually so uniquely tied together that they believe that language and land are exactly the same thing. So I appreciate the question.
Probably got time for
Yeah.
one more.
One or two more, if we, just because I know there's probably some richness in the conversation that we haven't had yet. But I love that. Adam, thank you so much. Yeah, Colin, please.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, I know. Sorry, guys. No, I don't honestly have a question. I just wanted to say thank you for these guys and this team and these teams. Like, just the hard work that I've seen from so many different amazing people in these organizations. It just inspires me, honestly, every day. And so I'm just really thankful just to see real international knowledge sharing and just see how we're getting connected again. So thank you, Chris. Thank you for the team at NCIAF. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Nishin. Like, this is just makes my heart beat fast with inspiration. So thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah, I
Colin.
don't think we can
Wow.
underestimate how young NCIAF is and how much you all have accomplished together. So we're just so grateful that we're part of your partnership. And I have one question just to think about next steps around the agribusinesses and the partners that you showed, Chris, in your slide, and Nishin in your work, Adam in yours. How do we improve mentorships and internships for the young professionals as we kind of look forward to the integration, and how do they get the experience that they need and the opportunity to sort of raise their own boat as we prepare them for what is needed? So I just would like to know mentorships, internships, should we be creating? Do we approach agribusiness in a new way? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing from my standpoint is the intentionality and the right way of creating mentorships. Let's not create mentorships for the fact that we can hit a quota or check a box or hit a random, this would be great if. I think the intentionality from leadership and organizations, be it agribusiness or it doesn't matter, retail, automotive, it doesn't matter what that business is. The business and the leadership has to be set up to be supportive of those individuals that are coming into the organization, no matter what the background is. So if it is someone who is new to the country and they're coming into a new space and we're going to welcome into our workplaces, we have to be prepared and set up to support that individual. First Nations, Métis, Inuit peoples coming into the organization need another set of supports that are different from the Western culture set of supports. And how do we ensure that we're not just filling boots, that we are intentionally providing these opportunities for individuals and meet them where they're at, not fit into the mold of the organization and this is how we do business, but how do we really support whatever that background is, whatever ethnicity, color of skin, gender, race, any of that stuff, where are we doing to meet them, to welcome them into our organizations? And I think the other piece at the end of the day with these mentorships and everything else is it's pivotal. Like we have to increase food production by 50 to 70% by 2050. We are not going to do that out of getting a bigger air drill or a bigger planter or anything else. This is going to have to be innovation. This is going to have to be taking the Western culture knowledge of research, data, and analytics and combining it with the traditional ways of growing and harvesting and preserving the land so that it's not burnt out. And without mentorships and building the labor pool of that next generation that is sitting in the basement playing Fortnite and meeting them where they need to be, we will have a turnover of employees that will happen every 4 weeks because I don't fit here. I don't belong here. I'm going home. So how do we build those mentorships in conjunction with good process and good support? Nishin, Radam, thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've had a number of internships over the years. Right now, we've got we're building a very strong team within our sales crew. They're young individuals from different parts of Ontario. It's a very dynamic world now. Like we've got everyone wakes up every morning. We have a rise and shine. The whole team comes together for 15 minutes, very positive atmosphere, encouraging what they're grateful for that day, what their priorities are for that day. It's a different vibe, compared to when I was their age and the type of dynamic you had on a day-to-day basis, right? It's a very team focused environment and keeping people motivated. The key thing when we were trying to draw folks in wasn't necessarily, their academics or their experience. It was their attitude, right? It really was, it was their attitude and genuine interest in wanting to join the team and be a part of something, growing something. And I think that's a big part to making sure that these internships and mentorships work well is ensuring you've got good alignment between those candidates and the organization, leadership within your organization, whether that be, myself or any of our other folks, part of our leadership team, is making sure you've got alignment there. And I think, the other piece that it makes me think about is, that nourishing nations part as part of NCIAF is really the nourishing the young people, right? Being able to recognize and see a genuine interest in our young people in the world of agriculture in whichever way it may be, and really just encouraging them to go in that direction, right? Go for it, right? There's so much opportunity for you there, and creating cool experiences for them to continue to use as those touch points for them to advance themselves in that industry. I think for me, it's it's home for me as my daughter has expressed interest in farming and equestrian. Well, if that's where her interest lies, we're just trying to nourish that as much as possible to so that she'll consider moving in that direction. And who knows what other doors it will open for her within the world of agriculture and the farming world. And I think it's even though I have zero experience in the equestrian world, and aside from making craft beer over the last decade, that's my experience. But I recognize that making sure they have that opportunity and just encouraging them, right? Really encouraging them to consider that opportunity.
Yeah, I think if you look coast to coast, it's no secret. Attendance in schools is down, and then when you look at Indigenous schools, exact same thing. I know there's a higher reliance on social media, and we're seeing different types of mental illness, and then there's also a lot on gaming. I think a lot of kids love the gaming. I know gaming and drones, it's almost the same controller. So that's how I was able to get the kids out of the basement. And when you get kids out of the basement and you get them in the sunlight and you get them on the land and you get them doing physical activity, it's also no secret that medical science has already proven this. Sunlight, physical activity combat some mental illnesses, and these types of things lead to healthier outcomes. I think that's the key. Getting the kids on the lands. I know we had this the system and this premise based on academics and education, and I don't know if that fits for a lot of Indigenous people. So I think that if we could create a system of change right there, I still believe there's an opportunity to have STEM make a big impact. I've seen it. I've seen kids flying or piloting a flying robot and loving being on the land doing it. So I know we could do it. I know the answer's there. And I think idle hands, it leads to these different addictions. And these addictions aren't just for Indigenous nations. I went to rural Ontario in Manitoulin Island, and just if you go a little south there, the Grey Bruce Peninsula, some of the worst drug use I've ever seen in those rural farm towns. So this isn't this is a thing for our. This isn't one nation. This is a society issue, right? And so for me, I think if you get people back on the land, you get people busy, you give them something to do, you might eliminate some of these other things we see. So that's my opinion.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.
A big round of applause for our speakers and NCIAF. Thank you so much. We have one or two quick messages because this isn't just a one and done conversation. We are investing in what comes next. Rebecca, do you want to say a little bit about what's going on in well, we've got, first of all, Chris, why don't you speak to this? Because we want to make sure everybody knows this is going on in the future.
Yep, for sure. Just a quick note, Regina, Saskatchewan, one of the largest ag shows in the world, Canadian Western Agribition. We will be hosting the Indigenous Ag Summit that is going to bring knowledge sharing, growing opportunities to Indigenous agriculture, to Indigenous peoples. So look, come on down, see you there.
Thank
you. Big show all week long. Yeah.
And Rebecca, do you have an announcement that we want to add on?
Yeah. We're happy to have you all join us today. If you haven't yet joined our NAAAN CONNECT platform, we'd encourage you to do so. And we're thrilled to announce that later this month, in celebration of National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada, we're also launching an NCIAF group within our engagement platform. And we're inviting an additional 600 or so individuals from the NCIAF networks to join as well. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah. Carrying on the conversation. So Chris, Adam, Nishin, all the NCIAF team, thank you so much. Everyone who joined us, please come on back. We want to have these conversations about 3 times a year. Please give us your ideas, things that we can foster between Canada, Mexico, and the United States on the land, extension, rural advisory services, and empowerment for our economic and rural communities. So let's continue the conversation, and we thank you for your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.